It's a video, guys. It's a video.
Okay. Oh, yeah, bring that pupper.
Since the last event this car participated in, I addressed the brake pads, got a new set of RS4 handcooks, and replaced the shifted turret gasket. In addition, I added a beefier sway bar in the front to help balance out the weight transfer and to allow for a more immediate response. The shocks have been set to full soft on the rebound side of things since compression is not adjustable, and the car was wiped down for its first event with the Roadster Cup crew. Tudor handed me my official Roadster Cup numbers and I proceeded to install them on my car. I've been craving to get out with these guys in the Pinata since the days of the hospital stay, and finally that day was here. On the first lap of the first session, it seemed like everybody was having issues with the greasy track or tire pressures or both, and that's myself included. Prior to leaving, I asked my friends if I should drop the pressures from 35 cold to around 28 or so, which everybody agreed with. However, I completely forgot to do this. Eventually, my inflated tire pressures began to make themselves apparent. After some sideways action through certain sections of the track where I really shouldn't be going sideways in the 1.6, I finally pulled into the pits to have the crew chief examine the temperatures as well as the pressures. As expected, the centers of the tires were quite a bit hotter, which called for a quick adjustment. After the pressures were checked, the crew chief and I went out on a scouting mission to check out the competition. He concluded that there was nothing to worry about, as our car was obviously the slowest of the pack. Later in the day, I found a good rabbit to chase in a blue NB Miata. The driver was quite a bit faster than I was, however it gave me the perfect opportunity to try out different lines and get used to turning the wheel less. On a whole different note, my friend Josh mentioned I'll eventually need proper gloves to replace my gardening gloves. That being said, if you don't have any gloves, these are better than nothing. At the time, I just couldn't go back to driving barehanded anymore. It didn't feel right. The end of the day was marked by me crashing into just about the only gravel wall in the lower streets of Willow that I of course managed to find, and wiping out my front bumper and under tray. Thankfully the fixes were quick and I managed to get the car ready for the next adventure. Back with Alfa Club, it was time for my first wheel-to-wheel race. It wasn't a spectator-loaded event full of sponsored cars, but I couldn't care less. I finally had the opportunity to drive with some very experienced club racers. All that I wanted to do was to finish my day with a checkered flag. I hadn't driven at Buttonwillow for years at this point, and my fastest time in my Evo was in the 210 ballpark, which is very slow for an Evo, mind you. That's all the reference I had, so I had to work extra hard to learn the track and somewhat figure out my optimal tire pressures. I was slowly experimenting with each turn, taking them slightly faster or in a different gear, or braking later, or even slowing down to improve the setup for the upcoming corners. Buttonwillow is a fast track and mechanical grip becomes very apparent when you're flying through Riverside foot to the floor in 4th gear, trying to reduce steering input as much as possible to slingshot the car into setup for Phil Hill. Phil Hill itself is a pure riot, making for my favorite section of the track. And it was at Phil Hill when I first noticed that something wasn't right with the way the front was behaving. I learned that the upper ball joints on my control arms decided that they did not want to remain attached, so it was time to find some alternative upper arms. Thankfully, Sevens Only Racing at Buttonwillow had just the right arms for me. With the help of my good friend Hano, we tackled the repair in about an hour. With my crude hammer-wielding methodology and his carefully planned approach involving pre-torquing the wheels prior to setting the car on the ground, just to have the peace of mind that there is some torque on the wheel, the car was ready to get back on track for the green flag drop. The race started off amazingly well. I managed to prevent a pass by braking later and found a good rabbit to chase in the spec Boxster. Where I was quicker through the turns, the Boxster had me on the straights, but this became irrelevant very quickly. On my second lap of the race, I cut too deep into the off-ramp, hitting the bump stop aggressively on the front right corner of the car and short-circuiting the battery. This resulted in the most heartbreaking way one could end their first wheel-to-wheel race, a DNF. I wanted to give up and I wanted to go home, but I didn't. I canceled my date for the following Sunday and signed up for another day at the track. And oh boy, I was glad I did that. Sunday is when I met Alex Renderos, who quickly became my friend and an important guide in keeping the car intact for the remainder of the day. Battling Alex was incredible fun. That is until the car started to starve for fuel. This got worse through the day. At this point, the checkered flag became my primary concern for the remainder of the race, even if it meant limping the car across the start-finish line. That weekend I had the time of my life meeting all the great drivers who each had some wisdom to share with me throughout the day. In the meantime, I'll need to go back to the garage and properly go through the car and decide on the next adventure. Until then, stay tuned for more shenanigans to come.